Sports are a predictable thing. Of course, we don't like to think of them that way. We're always waiting for the epic comeback, the victorious underdog, or the record-shattering performance. But for that exact reason, predictability is central to the allure of any sport. The more set in stone a given outcome seems, the grander the moment when that predictability is shattered. Enter the July 2025 Pro Sumo tournament in Nagoya, Japan, and perhaps the most remarkable breakdown of predictability in the history of sumo. Now, if you're relatively new to sumo, in order to understand the story, we first need to understand sumo's ranking system, the Banzuke. Sumo's top division, Makuuchi, has several ranks within it. The top 4 ranks, in order, are Yokozuna, Ozeki, Sekiwake, and Komusubi. Even if you are new to sumo, you've probably heard the term Yokozuna. This is the Grand Champion rank. All Yokozuna are expected to compete for titles anytime they're healthy enough to compete at all. Ozeki are expected to push for titles themselves, since consecutive championships at that rank are how someone becomes a Yokozuna. Sekiwake and Komusubi don't have quite the same pressure, but if the Yokozuna and Ozeki falter due to injury or any other reason, they're expected to pick up the slack. Combined, these ranks are known as the Sanyaku. The number of wrestlers in these ranks fluctuates. In recent years, there have usually only been 7 or 8 wrestlers total. Even in decades past, when promotion to this level was a little easier to come by, the number rarely went past a dozen. It's a very select group. Everyone else in the division is Maegashira rank. Makuuchi has 42 total wrestlers. The Maegashira ranks consist of 42 minus however many are in the Sanyaku. Regardless of the exact number, they're always the vast majority of the division. Now, championship records exist back to 1909. From then through July 2025, there have been 525 tournaments. Maegashira wrestlers have only won 38 top division titles, or 7.2%. This is despite, depending on era, making up 60 to 80% of the division. Furthermore, since 1958, the start of the 6 tournaments per year schedule, and often considered the beginning of sumo's modern history, Maegashira wrestlers have won 27 of 402 tournaments, or 6.7%. Before a run of 3 straight Maegashira winners in 2022, the only time that's ever happened, the rate was 5.7%. And the more spotty records we have before 1909 usually show top-ranked wrestlers winning the title as well. So, the expectation that Sanyaku wrestlers will win the top division title has held true for basically all of sumo's lengthy history. Given those statistics, it should come as little surprise that the dramatis personae for our story, Atami Fuji, Kusano, Anishki, and Kotusho, were all Maegashira rank wrestlers. But let's hold off on them for a moment longer and first introduce the author of modern sumo's greatest Maegashira performance, Koto Fuji. In July 1991, Koto Fuji took the Emperor's Cup with a 14-1 record. The record itself isn't the thing. Several other Maegashira champions since 1958 have matched that feat. 2 other details closely connected to each other are why this is the most dominant of those titles. First, Koto Fuji was the only one to start 13-0. There's a certain additional pressure involved when you're carrying an undefeated record that long. At some point, fans go from wondering if you can stay perfect to expecting it, and a certain amount of that mindset invariably filters in. And with even a single loss, it's easier to stay honest and understand you have to work your ass off for each win. Being undefeated for long enough carries a greater risk of believing your own hype, which can not only create vulnerability, but a greater crash if and when you do lose. The second detail is that he became the first Maegashira wrestler to clinch the title with 2 days remaining in the tournament. It cannot be understated how difficult that is to do. For one, it's not all in your control. Your opponents have to lose multiple times, and you can only beat them once each, so you need help. But even when that help exists, it still requires a masterful performance that can evade even the sport's legends. Taiho, Yokozuna for a decade and a 32-time champion, only clinched the title after day 13 once. It's hard to do. But Koto Fuji gave that performance, and not only was he the first Maegashira to clinch with 2 days remaining, he's still the only one. Our quartet story is not of any individual performance that equaled Koto Fuji's. It's that this was only the second time after Kotofuji's Basho where no Sanyaku wrestlers had a chance at the title after 13 days. And as singular as Kotofuji's achievement was, I'll argue that this combined effort, with 4 men in the position only Kotofuji was in back in 91, was even more noteworthy. Now we can talk about the protagonists. We'll start with Atami Fuji because, objectively speaking, he was the least significant player on the stage. There's no disrespect intended in that statement. He earned his place in this group. After 13 days, he was tied with Kusano at 10-3 and in the same position, needing to win and get a bit of help to have a chance at the title. At the same time, history will almost certainly view him as the one who backed into his position. Where Kusano didn't drop a match until day 5 and spent the entire tournament no more than 1 win off the pace, Atami started 0-2, was rarely just 1 win back, and never tied for the lead. It can be fairly argued that he didn't face anyone equal to his ability for the first 12 days, something which can't be said for the other 3. And after losing to Komusubi Takayasu on day 14, he was the only one of our 4 main characters who was out of contention on the last day. Kusano, on the other hand, was in contention from the start. Although he struggled in wins against the much smaller Fujinokawa and Asakoryu, he started 7-1 and yet appeared significantly more comfortable the second week of the tournament. As mentioned, he was tied at 10-3 with Atami Fuji after 13 days, but it's fair to say his losses to Kotusho, Takanosho, and Sekiwake Wakataka Kage were to an overall higher caliber of opponent than Atami's, and his win over Anishki on day 14 kept him in contention until the end. I'm grouping them in their own chapter for a couple of reasons. One, although Kusano was involved in the title race for far longer than Atami Fuji, they were tied after 13 days with no wins over Yokozuna Onosato or Wakataka Kage, the Sanyaku wrestlers closest in the chase. That is, neither one played an active role in knocking Onosato or Wakataka Kage out of contention. And 2, both are part of Isegahama's stable. With both performing well and being fairly close in rank, under normal circumstances they likely would have faced each other. However, being from the same stable, they could not fight each other unless they met in a playoff at the end. So, to some degree, the fact they were stablemates probably helped both of them land in this position rather than one or the other. Anishki went into the July tournament not just the highest ranked of these 4 wrestlers, but with a not insignificant number of fans feeling he'd been robbed of a spot at Komusubi. Instead, he was Maegashira 1 East, the highest non-Sanyaku rank, and unlike the other 3, it placed him in the crosshairs of the best in the sport. The way match scheduling works, the other 3, as lower ranked Maegashira, only faced Sanyaku opponents near the end due to their strong performances. And because it didn't happen until later days, none fought more than 3. As the top Maegashira, however, Anishki had to face all 7 active Sanyaku wrestlers immediately. Still, his fans had reason for hope. Anishki, up to this point, had steamrolled the entire sport. He'd blown through all 4 lower divisions in a year with a 38-4 combined record and never had fewer than 10 wins in 4 full 15-match tournaments. It was an essentially unheard of level of success. On top of that, most of the recent immediate successes in sumo are university grads who came into the sport at 23, 24 years old and were near or at their physical primes. Anishki's career began at 19, and it was easier to see him improve tournament by tournament. But the top ranks are a different monster. Moreover, the Sanyaku wrestlers have been especially dominant in recent times. Excluding Terano Fuji, who retired after a few matches in January, there were 7 Sanyaku wrestlers in each of 2025's first 3 tournaments. However, only 10 men total held those ranks, and the 3 who had fallen out of those ranks before July, Wakamoto Haru, Oho, and Abi, held the 3 ranks directly behind Anishki. This was clearly going to be his greatest test to date. Few people expected him to fall apart, but some struggles were anticipated. Instead, Anishki treated most of the Sanyaku like the tackling dummies he'd made out of the rest of the sport. His signature winning move, the rare and difficult Uchimuso, took down not 1, but 2 Sanyaku opponents in Ozeki Kotozakura and Sekiwake Kirishima. He and his coach shifted game plans as necessary, getting in tight to take advantage of Yokozuna Hoshoryu's injured toe, then sticking with a push attack the next day against Wakataka Kage. It wasn't a perfect run. Anishki struggles against strong pushing attacks, which landed him in Onosato's wheelhouse. And when he tried to set up a third Uchimuso against Takayasu, Papa Bear was ready for it and took him down. He was also fortunate Sekiwake Daisho was injured and not participating, as Daisho has the most dangerous pushing attack in sumo outside of Onosato. But when all was said and done, that vicious first week ended with a 5-2 record, a guarantee all opponents going forward would be ranked lower than him, and a reason to be confident in continued success. That success continued for 6 more days. By day 11, he'd beaten Wakamoto Haru, Oho, and Abi and took a share of the lead. After 13 days, he was 11-2 and retained that lead. Only one man had managed to keep pace. Where Anishki has thus far epitomized promise fulfilled, Kotusho has been, at best, promise unmet. Some viewed him as possessing the talent and potential to rise high in the sport. Though undercut by a problematic right ankle throughout his career and other injuries at various times, he's been a consistently good, not great wrestler who faltered when challenged by the best the sport had to offer. His best performance to date was a Jun Yusho, a second-place finish, in January 2023. Even there, he managed to avoid the entire Sanyaku until his final day match for the championship against Ozeki Takakeisho. July was not expected to be any different. He'd missed the first 5 days in May with a leg injury. While he came back strong, going 6-1 after finally joining the tournament, he faded with losses over the last 3 days. When he began July 3-0, then followed up with losses to Fujinokawa and a suddenly invigorated Mitakeumi, a fan could be forgiven for thinking this would be another inconsistent tournament that could have, should have been better, but wasn't. But something was a little different. The 3-0 start included a win over Kusano on day 3. The noteworthy thing wasn't so much the victory, but that he was clearly larger and at least as strong as Kusano, a prospect lauded for his own size and strength. Even after losing his following 2 matches, it seemed like he should be more capable than usual of enforcing his will on his opponents. And that was exactly what he did. From day 6 on, day after day, he handled each wrestler who stood before him the way it looked like he should be able to handle them. Once he reached 9-2 and was sent up the Banzuke to face Takayasu, his ankle stayed firm and let him spin away nicely to let Takayasu run himself out of the ring. He pulled a similar move on Kirishima on day 14, and sandwiched between those, as a huge underdog against Onosato, he looked back to their old matches against each other. He kept the Yokozuna off balance, pulled so Onosato could never collect himself, and with one throw, guaranteed a champion from Sumo's rank and file. His win over Kirishima, combined with Kusano's victory over Anishki the same day, broke the tie and put Kotusho in sole possession of the lead. Defeating Anishki himself on day 15 gave him a 13-2 finish, a 2-win lead over his closest competitors, and his first championship. But the championship really isn't the story here. It's how not 1, but 4 Maegashira wrestlers outperformed the entirety of the Sanyaku Elite, a group that carried not just the expectation of their ranks, but had proven their ability to meet those expectations. So there's another part to this story: why Sumo's best fell short. 8 wrestlers were in the Sanyaku for July. One of them, Daisho, couldn't fight due to an injured calf, so 7 were active. Hoshoryu came into the tournament with a fractured big toe and was ineffective. He dropped out after 4 matches. Their absences removed some potential obstacles to the title. On the other hand, the newest member of the Sanyaku, Komusubi Oshoma, was considered somewhat lucky to achieve the rank and expected to struggle. Even his biggest detractors, however, could not have anticipated just how bad it was. Suffering loss after loss after loss, he finished 3-12 and was hardly a test for anyone. However, the only one of our main characters he lost to was Anishki, and there were 5 other relatively healthy Sanyaku wrestlers who we could expect to thwart the ambitions of these high-flying Maegashira. Why wasn't that enough? When it comes to the Ozeki, Kotozakura, relative health is an important phrase. He's been plagued by a bad knee since the start of the year, one that's neither getting better nor worse. He had a good start at 5-2, but then dropped 3 straight to lose any hope of a title. In addition, despite his 7-1 head-to-head record against Atami Fuji coming into the tournament, he lost to Atami on day 13. That win moved Atami to 10-3 and allowed for his inclusion in this story. Wakataka Kage and Kirishima, the active Sekiwake, were considered the non-Yokozuna favorites to win the title, but Waka suffered a bout of food poisoning in the first week, contributing to a 3-4 start. His follow-up 6-win streak to reach 9-4 got him close to contention. Had he beaten Anishki early on, this story wouldn't exist, but he didn't, and thus never truly had a chance at the title. Kirishima suffered a reverse fate. He stormed out to a 7-1 record with his only loss to Anishki, but he caught a fever in the second week and, after stretching his record to 8-2, collapsed over the final 5 days to 8-7. However, because he had a winning record locked up, he was still put in against Kusano and Kotusho to test them as contenders and lost both. Sumo doesn't care if you're ill. If your rank and record dictate a certain opponent and you're willing to get in the ring, you get who you get. He fought Kotusho on day 14, too late to affect our story, but Anishki? A win there, and again, this story wouldn't exist. That's one crucial part of our tale. 7 proven elite wrestlers held a Sanyaku rank, but only 2 were healthy for the full 15 days. One of them, somewhat surprisingly, was Takayasu. He was widely considered fortunate to remain a Komusubi despite a disappointing 6-win May, but with his back issues finally taking a back seat for a full tournament, he showed his worth with a very strong 10-5 record. His only losses in the first 11 days were to the 2 Yokozuna and Sekiwake Kirishima. No shame there, and at 8-3, he was only 1 win back with a chance to keep pace against Kotusho on day 12. Had he won, this story wouldn't exist. But Koto's pirouette put him 2 wins back, and his loss to Tamawashi the next day ended any sparse hope for a title. He did remove Atami Fuji from contention on day 14, but it was too little too late for himself. And then there's Onosato, the newly promoted Yokozuna. Various curses are alleged to exist in sumo. When a wrestler has a great achievement, there's a perception he's destined to fall off somewhat in the next tournament. In fairness, curse is more of a fun term for something with an actual explanation. The wrestler is dragged out to endless social events celebrating whatever that achievement is, and he can't rest and prepare for the next competition as he normally would. Or, especially when someone reaches Ozeki or Yokozuna, the pressure of the new standard they need to meet gets to them. While I can't speak to Onosato's social habits, the second aspect of the curse certainly did seem to play into his July tournament. The worst habit he's had throughout his career is a tendency to move backwards and try to push attacking wrestlers down into the dirt. There are times for this tactic, but it requires some setup. Do it too quickly and it's destined to fail. It's even worse with Onosato. Since he's so strong moving forward, pulling back is simply a less effective way for him to fight. Over the past several months, he did well to avoid this habit and rely more on attacking sumo. Yet his first 2 losses to Oho and Hakuoho were caused by falling back into this exact tendency. Turns out he hadn't kicked the instinct to throw it in reverse when he felt stuck, he simply hadn't found himself in that mental space very much lately. And losing in that way did nothing to alleviate the pressure. He managed to fail differently on day 10, pushing Tamawashi into a very compromised spot, but then threw himself forward with some desperation rather than controlling his position. Tamawashi escaped with the win, and Onosato was at 3 losses. Nonetheless, when he met Kotusho on day 13, the crown still lay within reach. He need only beat someone he dominated in their last 2 matchups and who had only beaten him in the second division when he was in just his 4th pro tournament and had much more glaring flaws. Yet, the old trap worked, Onosato fell to 9-4, and the whole Sanyaku was officially out of the running. Had Onosato won, say it with me, this story wouldn't exist. There's another quirk to all this that you may have noticed along the way. If Anishki and Kotusho were leading at 11-2, and Onosato and Wakataka Kage were 9-4, why were the latter 2 out of contention? If there were 2 days left, 2 matches left for everyone, why couldn't Onosato and Waka catch up? The simple answer is that Anishki and Kotusho hadn't fought yet. Since it was essentially guaranteed they would, one of them would finish with a record no worse than 12-3. Therefore, anyone with 4 losses could no longer win the title. But that's why, to me, this is such a remarkable story. As extraordinary as Koto Fuji's feat was, we've seen plenty of individuals overcome all obstacles to win titles from out of nowhere. Rulon Gardner winning gold at the 2000 Olympics, Buster Douglas beating Mike Tyson. Just since 2021, 2 women have won major tennis tournaments from outside the top 32 seeds. It happens. This story is different. For all of the Maegashira wrestlers' momentum, all the physical ailments of the Sanyaku, all the big matches that had to go the way of these upstarts for the tournament to turn out how it did, it wouldn't have worked without multiple lower-ranked guys showing up and popping off. Now, from the start, I've said this is a story about 4 men. I couldn't blame you though if you feel like it's really about Kotusho and Anishki. Atami Fuji was never part of the conversation until he suddenly was. Kusano's biggest contribution to the race was beating Anishki to make Kotusho the sole leader, nothing to impact the core of the story. All the "this story wouldn't exist if" moments revolve around matches won by Kotusho and Anishki. And it's Kotusho and Anishki being tied for the lead that put the title out of reach for the Sanyaku. But Atami and Kusano deserve their places here. They stayed in contention when all those elite wrestlers couldn't. They each had to beat one of those elite wrestlers to stay in contention. Ichi Yamamoto at 8 West started 9-1. He had 3 chances to beat a high-ranked wrestler and be in this conversation as well. He lost them all. But that's sumo. It nearly always requires winning at least 12 of 15 matches to take the Emperor's Cup. Winning a single top division title is one of the most difficult feats in sport. To even come close is exceedingly tough. For these 4 men, of whom only one was considered even an outside contender, to outpace all the sport's best in chasing the crown? Regardless of how it happened, I say this is the most remarkable outcome a single tournament in top-flight sumo has ever seen. Agree? Disagree? Other thoughts?
Get in the comments!
And hey, like and subscribe. I'm a bad YouTuber and never say it, so now's as good a time as any. Other than that, have a great day, and I'll see you soon.